There's a lot to be said about this next topic.
Mm.
For a few weeks now, there's been a documentary out, or a docuseries out, called Quiet on Set, The Dark Side of TV, or something like that.
The Dark Side, I think it's called, or something like that.
Might as well put the specs on and get the proper name. So the official name is Quiet on Set, The Dark Side of Kids TV. That's the official name. So there was a couple episodes and the series was done. And then after that, Dan Schneider, who's one of the main people discussed in this docuseries, he did an interview with one of the former actors from one of his shows. And the person interviews him and asks him some questions. And he comes on and he largely apologizes, but not really. It's about 18 minutes and it's available on YouTube. And then they gave us one more episode just last night, the final episode, quote unquote. And this time they sat with some of the people in a different type of interviews that happen after the doc has been released. They asked them separate questions, lots of follow-up questions from the show itself. And so now it's all done and we've seen it all and we're here to discuss it. So where would you like to start?
Well, I think we have to start from the beginning and just.
All right, yeah, let's start with the original couple episodes. Or was it 4 episodes?
It was 4 episodes,
okay,
but yeah, I think we need to establish what the documentary entailed.
Okay.
So they interview a great deal of not only cast members but also
writers, crew members, directors, producers.
So they interviewed a lot of different people who had different roles. They interviewed parents of some of the cast members. Correct. And what we learn is largely that Dan Schneider was difficult to work with, to say the least. We learned that there was a lot of misogyny, there was racism, there was sexism, all of the things that today we try to combat in places of employment.
Yeah, because you missed the biggest one of all. Lots of sexual innuendos on multiple kids programming television shows.
Yes. I mean, I wasn't done, but yes. But from a workplace standpoint, there was a lot of different things going on. And yes, one of those things was that he was working sexual innuendo into the scripts and into some of the physical work that the kids had to do.
Yep.
And he was basically telling his writer's room, hey, if Nickelodeon execs come in and they want to hear about like what we're doing with this show or what we're doing with this, or if we have to pitch them a script or whatever, we're don't tell them that this is sexual. One of the specific ones that they talk about is Amanda Bynes' character. I forget what her first name was, but her last name was Taint.
Taint.
Right. And you could look up what that is. We don't need to get into it. But the point of the matter is when apparently a
Nickelodeon
executive actually did
come in and
say, hey, isn't this a sexual thing? And they said no, when in reality, that's absolutely what it was. There were a lot of videos where they showed certain things, some of the physical work involved having like goo or slime or whatever shot into someone's face. very much resembling a cum shot. Um, there was the one boy who was wearing the costume that one he said that it was really uncomfortable to wear those tight costumes like superhero costumes that
Yeah, it was
showed
basically spandex.
your whole body exactly. But he also talks about a sketch that they did about him having a nose being like a superhero, that the whole thing was surrounding his nose and they had noses all over him, and when you look at the noses,
Yeah, he
they
looks
look
like
like
testicles,
penises.
and yeah,
So there's a lot of, yes, there's a lot of that, but there's also on the other side of it, there's also this work environment that's happening that the kids don't feel comfortable in, but also the adults don't feel comfortable in, especially the women. It appears that he made himself very clear that he does not like women and doesn't think that women are intelligent. So we go through all of this. We then also find out that um, the oh gosh, what was his title? Peck. What was his? He was a
well, he had different
dialogue
titles.
coach.
Yeah, he had different titles. He was a dialogue coach. He was a cast member. He had some producer credits on one show, and so Peck. Uh, we find out that there were three different sexual abusers on this show. That three different people working on the set at different times were abusers, and that they were victimizing the children. I'm trying not to use the A word too much because YouTube will flag it. But they were victimizing the children in various ways. Um, and part of that we learn is Drake from Drake
Great
and
job.
Josh.
Mhm.
Um, he was the main victim of Peck. And in the show, he kind of gives details about what went down and how not only was he a victim, but this man also tore apart his family.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we find out lots of things about all of this during the 4 episodes. It's hard to watch. Let's start there.
And I say it all the time that I love watching documentaries, and I hated this. Not not in the sense that um, I don't think it should have been made or anything like that, but just this one was really really difficult to watch. Um, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine have to exist as an adult today, knowing that that's what I went through as a kid. And then on top of that, sit down with people. And they talked about how the directors were really sympathetic and sensitive to their situations. And that's what made them feel comfortable enough to do
Right,
the documentary. But the reality of the situation is it's still a documentary, no matter how sensitive they were. You still
right,
have to sit in front of a camera and tell your story. Things that are embarrassing to think about today, and especially because as a kid you can kind of you can reconcile things or put them away, or you don't really understand everything, but being an
right,
adult who lived through that as a child and then looking back and you're like, oh shit, like this is what happened to me, like this was messed up. And then
right,
hearing other people talk about how messed up their experiences were, and you realize how validated you are in your experiences, because clearly like there's other people who can identify.
right.
That's It's a lot for them. It was a lot for me to watch. I say it all the time, I don't really like to watch.
That's that iPhone.
I know. I don't like to watch things where like women and children are being,
Hurt.
hurt. So it's just, I mean, and that sounds bad. I don't like to watch things where men are being hurt either. It's super triggering for me when it's women or children, because I am a woman and because children can't speak for themselves.
And
That's
that was
all that
highlighted here,
is.
right? In
Yeah.
the series, it's highlighted that it's hard for women and children to speak up. Because even in Drake's situation, when his dad was his manager,
Mm-hmm.
his dad was blocking a lot of things from happening.
Yep.
And once mom took over, mom was manipulated, and pretty much Drake was taken away from her in a sense. I mean, in her mind, it was this is the right thing to do, allegedly,
Yep.
but uh, she was manipulated. Whether we want to say she was a good mom or a bad mom or blind or stupid to the things going on, the
Mm-hmm.
truth is she was manipulated. There's no way around that, right? And even in other people's situations, we see how the young kid, he was 13 at the time, they caused the rift between him and his mom
Him and his
because his
mom.
mom was up there saying, hey, some of this stuff is not right. You shouldn't be doing these things with kids. Kids shouldn't have to go through these things. And because of his mom, he was fired. And that causes a big rift, which we'll get to later. But they basically say, "Oh, we didn't." That ruined their relationship completely.
Well, when you
And
think
so,
about it, she had her ear to the streets. Like
but mom
she
was
was,
right. Just it's not even
yeah,
about the streets. It's about being there and seeing what's going on and saying, "Wait a minute, this is not right."
right. That's what I mean. I mean she was in it. Like she was able to say, I don't think this is right, or whether or not it ruined his career, it doesn't matter when you find out that one of the kids was continuously for a period of time like being hurt in
Attacked,
the
yeah.
way that they were. Like then I don't care. Then all of that is out the window as far as I'm concerned. Like it don't even matter that she interfered. Like she protected him from way worse because
Right, but look at the cause. Look at what it caused.
of
Like
course,
look at what it ended up doing.
of course, look at what it ended up doing. But I mean, her kind of trying to fend off racism and fend off them doing things that seemed inappropriate or whatever the case may be is a drop in the bucket compared to what it could have been if he stayed
Yeah.
on
No, you're
and
right.
was
You're right.
around, a man who deserved to be put under the jail.
And that's
So,
another thing that's really weird too, right? Like when you look at the amount of time that these gentlemen each received, it's not a lot of time.
no.
It's
Well,
not
they
a
said,
lot of time, and more so, which they shed a lot of light on later on in the
mhm.
last episode. These people were able to come back to work later on.
And they had celebrities, people of note that were Peck in particular that were there to vouch for him.
Yeah, write letters of support, sit there in court on their side, etc.
And a lot of the letters, and this is the grossest part for me, right? Aside from the physical aspect of it, but just given all of the details of the story, the grossest part for me was listening to some of the
The
excerpts
blurbs,
from the letters
yeah,
and finding out that
who wrote
actual
them?
grown adults, not just who wrote them, but actual grown adults were writing, he must have been enticed in some way for this to have
Crazy.
happened by children, by a
Yeah,
teenager. Nah. Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
yeah,
He got what? It
it's
was
really
something weird like 16 months or some shit like that. It was some ridiculous amount of time that
what that he was sentenced to, or the attack.
that he was sentenced to.
7 years,
Was it 7 years? Then
but he
who was
didn't do
then,
7.
then some then
Oh,
how much did
one of the other people got like 16 months or something. Yeah, but not Peck.
okay. I'm getting the details mixed up then I'm
It's,
sorry.
it, it was a lot. It was a lot.
Um
Don't blame me. But what stands out to me is how unsafe these environments are for kids.
right.
Because think about the fact that okay, someone was abused and then time was done. All right, cool. They have to register as an offender. Cool. But just think about what happens when you find out later on a convicted felon and registered offender is on set alone with your kid every day. That's wild. That's crazy and dangerous.
Yeah.
It's really,
Yeah.
really crazy stuff. And I mean, they spoke about a lot of stuff. They spoke about the young lady who wrote a book from the iCarly show. Her name slips my mind right now, but they spoke about her book and how she highlighted the things going on with Dan Schneider. Then she went on like a podcast later and described things in more detail and pretty much made it very clear was Dan Schneider doing these inappropriate things.
Hmm.
They also highlighted his relationship just being really bad with kids, like he was really close to certain kids, too close to certain kids.
All the
They spoke
pictures
about
of
Amanda
him and Amanda
Bynes.
Bynes.
Right. Yeah, they spoke about Amanda Bynes, how even when he was doing that show on the CW was like, yeah, nah, something ain't right here. He got to go. And, you know, if you don't mind, us moving this forward a little bit, like I saw the interview where he's interviewed by
Hmm.
the old castmate. And first of all, I don't know who this guy is. And I'm not saying that to diss the guy who interviewed him, but I just don't know who he is. Like I was really confused when I saw the interview because I'm like, who is this guy?
You also got to remember too, the second. So a lot of this was surrounding cast members of all that,
Yeah.
and we when we were younger, I think our age group experienced the first wave of all that.
Yeah, we wasn't I was saying that to somebody recently. We didn't watch that second cast.
No,
Drake and Josh, iCarly, that was like
no,
our younger siblings
you're
shows.
right, exactly. So,
Like I remember
so
my sister watching iCarly. And my little cousin was watching like Drake and Josh and what was the shit on Disney? Oh, Sweet Life of Zach and Cody.
Sweet Life of Zach and Cody. Yes, I never mind. So the I think that that's part of it, that we just wouldn't have watched that second wave, and there were a lot of spin-offs that came from
Well, I
the
knew who
next
the young lady
wave.
was from iCarly, both of them. I knew who the young lady was from Amanda Bynes' show. That we only saw the short deleted clip from her in the episode that aired last night. I knew who she was as like when I saw the pictures of them as kids. I was like, oh yeah, I
You knew
remember
of
her.
Ariana Grande,
Um, of course, we all know Ariana Grande.
but I
Um,
didn't know that Ariana Grande was on TV until, because I never used to see the iCarly stuff or any of that. But my niece, who's now 12 going on 13, she discovered, I know they did like a reboot of iCarly or some sort of continuation in the last couple of years, and then
uh-huh.
she started going down the whole Ariana Grande rabbit hole and things that she was on. So that's how I learned that Ariana Grande was actually on any of those shows. So when they talked about her, I knew, okay, this is what she did. The girl I recognized from iCarly, but I don't remember any of that while it was in
Yeah,
progress.
I just I was just saying the guy who interviewed Zack Snyder, excuse me. Zack Snyder is a
You
different
don't know who
guy.
that person is what you're
What's this
saying.
guy's name? The director?
Dan Schneider.
Dan Schneider. The guy who interviewed Dan Schneider, I don't know who he is. That's not a diss. I just didn't know who he was. I would
What was
like to
his
see
name?
someone. I don't know right now. But I would like to see someone with a little more uh, experience interview Dan Schneider, which it seemed like that was purposefully done because you keep seeing throughout the 4 episodes. We reached out to Dan Schneider, he wouldn't be on camera. We reached out to Dan Schneider, this is what his publicist sent back. We reached out to Dan Schneider, his lawyer said blah blah blah. So it was clear that he didn't want nothing to do with that.
So
So
you
I
think this
think
should have been a Gayle King interview,
no,
or
I
like
don't.
a Diane
It
Sawyer
was a
or
Gail
Robin
King interview.
Roberts?
That's what I'm saying. It was a Gail King interview. It was a fluff piece. It wasn't no hard hitting questions. It was come on, we
That
saw that shit with Jay-Z, man. Stop it.
Okay, we
That
did see that with Jay-Z, but not everything Gayle King does is fluff.
and she let Meg the Stallion lie on camera. Come on, stop it.
What about when she did R. Kelly?
That was cool. But that was acting 101.
Like, she did
I
okay
can't for
there.
my life right now.
Was honestly, that interview wrote itself. The
Right.
whole thing wrote itself.
Anyway, dude who interviewed him, he was all right, but it seemed more like this is my friend who's interviewing me. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? If I'm getting put on blast, you can't interview
Yeah, and it makes sense because Gio says that he reached out to her
and was
after they
looking for
knew
support.
that the documentary was about to come out. He reached out to her to ask her to write a letter of support or write words of support, just publicly say, I did another project with you after all that, and that went well, and whatever. And if you got to do that, if you got to reach out to people to ask them to publicly support you when you know that these things are out there about you, then you know that you've done wrong, I think, because my assumption, if I know that I've done right by other people and there was a documentary coming out where I was going to be one of the main focuses of the documentary, my assumption wouldn't be that they're going to say bad things about me.
Well, I disagree. If you know the point is to make you look bad, then you're gonna try to rally the troops and get ahead of it, right? Like if if person A decides to put out a doc saying, "Oh, JD did all these bad things," and I get wind of it, I would hit up my inner circle and say, "Hey, this is what they're trying to say. I need
Mhm.
to get ahead of this. I need to be able to combat this. I'm not on the doc, and I don't have the power to do my own doc. I mean, Dan Schneider does, but whatever." So
Would
yeah,
those be the
you would say
people?
like, let me hit up the people who I have good experiences with to try to get ahead of it. So when they drop the doc of JD the villain, we could combat it with JD the hero. You could say like, yeah, he was doing this, he did that. We have these receipts. We could show this community service work, etc.
But wouldn't you think that if they're already in the doc that they would be saying nice things? That's my point. If
Oh,
if if
okay, I
if
understand that.
you if you know if you know you're saying your friends, so if you know your friends are in a documentary that's about you, you're not gonna think, unless there is something, you're not gonna
I
think that
understand.
they're gonna go on and say something bad about
No,
you.
no, I
You're gonna
understand. I understand.
so
But I would argue those were not his friends.
they were not his friends, but they were people who worked closely with him, and he's calling and saying, "Hey, we had a good experience, right?" Like, then if you had a good experience, you had a good experience. You wouldn't need to try to convince them that they did.
Well, he didn't try to convince them. He just asked.
No,
Because
he
when she
tried to.
said it,
I feel like he tried to, because she said that he said it in that way where it was like, we had a good experience, right? So you could say good things about me. To me, that doesn't sound like you fully believe that. It sounds like
I
you
mean,
feel like you
after
got it.
knowing a doc is coming, how could you?
Okay.
Yes.
I hear
I don't
you.
think he tried to convince
I'm
her.
just
I think he was uncertain. I agree with that. But I don't
But
think
then
he was
what was
trying
he
to convince her.
doing? Then what do you think he was doing when he called her? Because the way she described it.
She said he asked. She said he asked me exactly what you said. We had a good experience, right? He
So do
didn't.
you don't
She
think
didn't
that's
say.
him
She
trying
didn't
to?
say.
Because he didn't
I think.
call and say, "What do you think of the experience we had?" He called, leading her towards what he wanted her to say.
Well, yeah, because he's asking for a quote of support.
Okay.
I think in his mind, he thought me and this person had a good experience working together, and maybe they'll give us a quote of support, which is what she said. And so, yeah, you're gonna ask like, "Hey, things went cool, right? So, do you mind giving a quote of support?" I don't think that's trying to convince somebody. If I dated a woman for years, I don't know. I don't work with people. Well, I worked with kids for years, right? So, if I worked with kids, I worked with kids for years in real life. So, if I feel like, hey, I need somebody who I was working, if I one of the kids that was in my program, if I need some kids from when I was working with kids to come forward who are now adults really, but I need some of them to come forward and kind of say nice things. Yeah, you're gonna, like I said, I don't think there's anything wrong with reaching out, and maybe I'm in the minority. I don't think there's anything wrong with reaching out. Now, if she said for the next 30 minutes he tried to convince me, for the next 15 minutes he tried to change my mind, then yeah, I would agree. But she didn't say that. She just said he called and asked, "Hey, we had a good experience, right?" Like if I called and said, "Hey, uh, person A, when I worked at the shelter, you had a good time, right? You enjoyed the experience in the recreation program those 4 years you were there." I don't think there's anything wrong with asking. Now, when they come and say no, then I got to say, okay, thanks, and hang up. And it seems like that's what he did. She didn't say he stood on the phone or kept trying to change my mind or any of those things.
I'm not
I
saying
think he
that.
was looking for reassurance, for validation. I think he was thinking in his mind, yeah, I remember the doc hadn't come out. He knew she was on it, but the doc
Right.
hadn't come out at that point. So you don't know what she said or didn't say.
But
So in
that's
his
kind of
mind,
my that's kind of my point. You don't know what the person is saying, but you do know that they're a part of it. And if you think that that person had a good experience with you, you wouldn't have to call them and ask them to say something nice about you, because your assumption would be this person had a good experience with me. Surely they'll get on the documentary and say nice things about me. That's what I'm trying to say. I just I don't. Then what do you think? If you know that you were a tyrant for the entire time that you were managing people, and then a documentary is coming out about you, and you're probably thinking to yourself, "Oh shit, I was fucked up to people. I need to check to see if people are saying that or not." You wouldn't have to do that if you had a clear conscience. And that's the point that I'm trying to make here. He knew well enough to know that he had to reach out to people to see if they could support him, because he knew that he had done things that were inappropriate. Whether he thought it was right or wrong, or whether he thought it was the 90s and he could do it or not, different conversation. But I think today, I think before the documentary even came out, he knew that there were going to be bad things about him. And he knew that the people who were being interviewed knew him and were actually around and could corroborate these stories.
but isn't it possible that he thought she already said something positive in the doc, and now she would be willing to also give a public statement?
It's possible.
That's
Yeah.
all I'm saying. I agree. He did bad things. I already said that. I'm not trying to, argue for him. I'm just saying I don't think he was trying to convince her. You said he called trying to convince her. I don't think he tried to convince her.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, while we're on convincing, let me say something. The young man who was in the episode, the guy who
Keep
had beef
forgetting
with
his
his
name.
mom,
Yeah, I keep forgetting his name.
who cares? The
No,
guy
that's
who
not
had beef,
nice.
I know it's not nice, and neither is what I'm gonna say next. He didn't convince me either. I didn't like that when he was with the young lady. He kept kind of like half answer or only allow her to start the answer. Even when his mom came, he was letting his mom do the talking. Yo, fam, you can't talk? What's up? Are you scared? What's up? It's
Maybe.
like he would only co-sign shit that other people were saying. They're like, oh, but did you feel safe? You want to go? Mom is there. They're asking him questions. Mom's like, yeah, can I answer? Oh, sure, mom, go ahead. Yeah, mom, you answer. Fam, what's up? You ain't got no balls? You can't speak?
Is it possible that he's still dealing with
The
that
trauma.
stuff in a big way? I'm not saying trauma, but is it possible that he's still dealing with that stuff in a big way? And the reason I say that is because he literally just started talking to his mom a couple weeks ago.
But what about
So
everything else? It wasn't only him and his mom.
I know it was only him and his mom, but that's a large part of the story for him. It completely changed his trajectory, going from, you know, them having a good relationship through him being 13 to this being him losing his job, and that being a pivotal moment in his life that uh essentially like estranged them. I don't know if I agree. I don't. I don't think that. I don't think he stood in it the way that other people did. I also did not like that he kept throwing it to Geo, because it was like, this, you guys are talking about things that really harmed you or hurt you as children, so that's got to be just as hard for her as it is for you. So to
Right.
keep pushing off answering questions to her was a little bit weird, but I just wondered if the reason he was doing that is because he's not completely comfortable, so he was relying on her, he was relying on his mom to kind of fill in the blanks where he wasn't comfortable speaking. Also, I think that with the internet and the way that information gets shared at this point, I think you also got to remember these were people who were on TV when there wasn't really much of that going on. And now here he is with a camera in his face, and everything you say, people are listening and people are sharing it. And I wonder if it's possible that that was part of his, um that was why he was acting that way, that he was just almost too aware that whatever I say could be, you know, taken. And because this, we have to remember that the episode 5 where Soledad O'Brien is interviewing them happened after we all saw the documentary.
Correct.
So it could be that at this, maybe he was comfortable when it was just cameras and it was a closed set, and then it would be edited and then it would be, distributed. This is very different, where now they've experienced the media response to the documentary and the public response to the documentary. It is
Right.
possible that there is some discomfort there, knowing how exposed they are right now and
Okay.
how intently people are watching and paying attention and sharing the information and discussing it and talking about it. I've seen videos of people like talking about Geo and how, oh, they remember watching Geo. And Geo said something that was really interesting that I think speaks to this also. She said it was almost like they felt like they had to comfort the public because this is something that we were learning for the first time, that they already knew and they became adults and they had dealt with or had been dealing with. And now here are all these people who looked up to them and are now dealing with their own uh bad feelings about what they saw in the documentary, because a lot of us were children when all of this was happening.
Yeah.
So I wonder if it's that. I'm not saying that I liked it, and I understand where you're coming from. Um, I didn't really like it either. I thought it was weird, but I'm just wondering if this is why, because they already know how involved the public has gotten with their stories. So maybe it was more of a, I don't want to say too much.
Well,
I
then
don't
I
want
think he
to.
should have said no comment, or I'm not comfortable speaking, because really throwing it to mom and throwing it to Geo, it looked like he had no free thoughts of his own. It
Hmm.
looked like he could not lead or lead a conversation even.
Yeah.
It looked like all I can do is follow a woman's lead. Is
Hmm.
that all you can do as a man with 2 children? He said he got a 4-year-old and a 10-year-old. So
Hmm.
you don't teach them how to lead conversations? I don't understand. Like, it was really weird to me. And I don't know him. So no, I don't know what he's dealing with. And he spoke about being in therapy. They've all spoke about being in therapy. Cool. Well, why are you just looking for black women to lead every conversation, fam? Like, you can't speak. If you feel uncomfortable and you already signed a contract saying you was gonna get paid for this, then say, hey, no comment. I'd rather not discuss that. Something, not just throwing it back to the women. Like, you look
Yeah.
mad weak.
It was weird. It was weird.
And the other thing is, I wanted to speak on that too. What Geo said people were hitting her up, talking about, oh, now my trauma is now now my childhood is traumatized because I watched this. Let me tell you something. People are so fucking full of shit. Your childhood is not traumatized. This trauma porn that's going on today is really nasty work.
Yeah.
Everybody just want to claim everything gave them anxiety, everything traumatized them. Yo, this is the weakest shit ever. If a draft happens tomorrow and we got to really go to war on the front lines, I don't know how we're going to do it. I don't know how we're going to do it. If watching a documentary, quote unquote, traumatized your childhood, even though you're 40 years old at this point, how the fuck you going to be on the front lines? What happens if right now somebody kicks in your door and comes in with the big joints? You know,
Well,
what you
let
gonna
me ask
do?
you
You
something.
just gonna cry in the corner?
Let me ask you something.
Jeez, it's like every 1 second. It's like everybody just want to be down with the trauma culture at this point. Everything traumatizes you. Is there nothing that? So what? Like if you get the wrong Uber Eats order, you're traumatized. Yeah, ask your question.
I just want to say I do agree with you. I think people get off on like shared negative experiences, and which is not called trauma bonding, but people
Oh
get
no,
off
that's a
on,
common misconception. I learned that recently.
yeah. Um people, yeah, I agree with all of that. What I will say is it does put a stain on something that you thought was good.
Right.
So my question was going to be, what are your feelings, uh, like coming away from the documentary? How how did you feel? Because we were kids when they were kids, and this was the content that was marketed towards us, was created. They said it, one of the first things they say when you start episode 1 is that um there, this was for kids, um being acted by kids, like it was meant for children. So how did this, coming away from it, how did you feel?
I was trying to look up the proper term for bonding over shared trauma. Um, I mean, coming away from it, I felt like, man, this is really fucked up. This is really sad. You know, it's really. Um, I felt like there was a lot of layers of problematic behavior. I felt like there are still lots of problems in Hollywood when it comes to protecting children. Um,
Yeah.
I I I feel like it's really foul what the studio, the directors, the producers, the adult cast members were doing in a lot of these situations.
Hmm.
Um, because they even said at one point, like, yeah, the law is parents have to be on set at somewhere on the set. And they say, like, yeah, at one point they just shoved all our parents in a room, basically. Um, I would have been like that mom. My kid would have got fired because I'm not with none of that. But I felt like this is very intentionally manipulative and abusive towards children. I don't mean the physical, I mean just
Hmm.
the mental capacity, the mental side of things, what this does to a child's psyche, having to work 12, 13 hours, having to deal with being spoken in certain ways, having kids give you massages. Like, it was really
I didn't
messed
even
up.
know about that.
Yeah, it's nasty, real nasty work. You know,
Gross.
so I walked away feeling like, man, it's really sad that these kids had to endure all of these things. It really made me question
Hmm.
uh, the parenting skills of these parents.
Yeah.
Because you know, first sign of trouble, you come running as a parent. I related a lot to Drake's dad saying like, nah, I saw this stuff and I wasn't with it. I spoke out,
Hmm.
and I understand as a parent how that goes. You know, where you see something that maybe the other parent doesn't see, and you're saying, hey, this thing is happening that's not good. This thing is happening that can cause a lot of problems if we're not careful.
Hmm.
So I really related to that. I walked away feeling like much of what they said in the very last episode that aired last night. there needs to be changes. There need to be legal changes that protect children from these type of predators being on set and being in the workforce. And we really need to vet who we put our children around. We all are careful with there's a thing in our culture that we say everybody got that one uncle. Well, why we don't adopt that to the workplace? Why are we taking our children and leaving them alone with anybody? I think if there's a place where, don't get me wrong, I worked in after school programs and summer camps and all that stuff. Your kid is there alone, sure. But this is different. This is a work environment.
Right.
And a lot of times the kid is the breadwinner in that family. Let's be honest. So wouldn't you want to protect the golden goose? Like I just think it's really weird. I feel really bad for everyone. I mean, obviously Drake went through the craziest shit. And man, I feel really bad for Drake. Also really smart of Drake to drop a song and a video and an album. Because I'm sure his streams are up. Smart business move on his part.
Mhm.
Um,
I mean,
but
if
I
you
walked
can,
away just feeling like this is really bad, and feeling bad for them, and feeling like there need to be changes. There need to be changes that protect these children. I don't understand how you have a work environment where background checks are not being done, and they're alone in rooms with kids and taking kids to different sets alone, and like it's just really bad all around. And I felt really bad for them.
Mhm.
Um, I walked away feeling like Dan Schneider is full of shit, especially after seeing that interview with his was seemingly as his homeboy, where like they said he apologizes but doesn't really take accountability either. Um, yeah, that's what I walked away with.
It was disappointing for me. I mean, I agree with all of what you said. Like, I think that I've felt similar in that way, but it was just really disappointing. It's like, I don't know if you've ever thought about, like, you've ever looked at kids when you were younger and been like, wow, that's so cool that they get to be on TV, and you
Of
kind of,
course, yeah, of
admire them and idolize them a little bit.
course. We all wanted to be Keenan and Kel.
Right. Like, it just seemed like so cool that they could do this
Yeah,
really cool thing. And I mean, Kel, I haven't heard anything from Kel. I know Keenan um did speak about it on the Tamron Hall show, and basically said he, thankfully did not experience that, but they didn't work with Dan as closely, and um
which is bullshit.
he doesn't have right with I was about
Because
to I was getting there.
in the doc, they clearly show him on the set of all that, on the set of Good Burger,
Good
whatever it was
burger,
called,
because
on
that
the
was
set
Dan.
of Keenan and Kel show. Like
Yeah.
clearly
Yeah.
bullshit. He's protecting his political connects.
And that's fine. I feel like however you want to deal with your experience is your choice. Um, these people could have very good and well said they didn't want to be a part of the doc either. I
Right.
think that however you decide to deal with your experience is okay, which is why when you said Drake Bell made a smart business move, I even said to you off pod, I mean, who else who better to profit off of your trauma, and I will
Yeah.
use trauma for this because it fits.
I'm
um,
really shocked he didn't get a payout.
well, no, because they
I understand
painted
there was
it
a criminal
in.
case, but I'm shocked that they didn't sue Nickelodeon.
Here's what I'll say about the entertainment industry.
It's predatory by nature.
It's predatory by nature, and the rules are not, we all, everyone outside of the entertainment industry kind of exists in a different world. The rules are different.
Yeah.
I think today there's a lot more compliance in place. There's a lot more, like, because they're even saying that the same scripts, went through S&P, like went through a whole process
Yeah.
to make
They are.
sure that the scripts were suitable for the age group that it was for.
Yep.
Bullshit. Bullshit.
Yeah.
Who was reviewing the script? So they operate with a different set of rules. I think
Yeah.
today it probably aligns more with the rest of corporate America. Not completely. I have seen like just even like an employee handbook at an entertainment company versus another type of company, very different. Um, so, and I think back then everybody was able to get away with everything. You could just, there wasn't a whole lot of checks and balances. There weren't a whole lot of ways to prove things the way there are now.
Right.
Um, so I think that's part of it. I think that we were living in a different time
Yeah.
where a lot more could fly and no one thought about it. I think for ages, children weren't protected in a way that they should have been. We see things like that when we think about people like R. Kelly, because to me it's similar. It's not the same, but it's similar.
I get what you're saying.
You know, these there were parents bringing their young daughters to his concerts and taking them backstage and thinking that it wasn't a big deal. You know, today I can't imagine, you know, my my 12-year-old niece being like, "Oh, she likes I don't know who the young singers are these days. Somebody from One Direction or something. I know they're old now, but somebody from One Direction or whatever. Hey, can we go backstage?" I can't imagine my sister being like, "Yeah, sure, let's go." Not, because we know differently now. We know better, and I'm
Or
not
it
saying
would
that
be
those
let's not okay. Go ahead. See you in an
or you
hour.
go back, right, exactly. I just think that there was a lot of like leeway that was given before, and honestly, yeah, some bad parenting too. But I just think that that's a whole different world, and a lot of things fall under the radar in a way that they wouldn't fall under the radar in other spaces. So that's not an excuse. It's like the nasty part of the entertainment industry.
I got you. I totally get it. That's why I said predatory by nature.
Yeah, yeah, in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, absolutely.